estamos con el profesor Luca Salvatici de la Universidad Roma Tre, que es investigador invitado del Instituto Interdisciplinario de Economía Política de Buenos Aires, aquí de la Facultad de Ciencias Económicas y de CONICET, y hoy nos va a dar un seminario sobre cadenas globales de valor y política comercial. Y justamente le vamos a hacer una entrevista respecto de estos temas. Luca, nice to be here in Buenos Aires. It's a pleasure for us to invite you. We are waiting for your seminar. And we want to know something more about your seminar. Could you tell us why your papers talked about that traditional way to analyze trade, like gross export and gross import, are not enough to analyze trade, cross-sector and countries' interaction nowadays in the current context?
Yes, thanks. Thanks for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. I've been studying international trade and trade policies for many years, and I think that this change that has taken place in recent years is very relevant. So basically we are used to think about trade flows as a product of a country reaching another country, but nowadays we export intermediate products, not only final products. And this implies that your export then are embedded in other products that are then further exported, and sometimes they come back in your own country. So the traditional view, made in Argentina, made in Italy, it makes less sense today, because basically your product also includes value added of many other suppliers. And this has some kind of deep implications in terms of trade policy, because you think that you are hitting with tariffs the products of a specific exporter, but you are actually hurting all the supplier to that exporter. So the unintended consequences of bilateral policies can be quite wide-reaching.
Okay. And do you have a particular approach to analyze these interactions and the impact of trade policy? For example, this analysis could be useful for policymakers to entail the reform of trade policy, taking into account their own impact on their imports and their capacity to generate value added more competitively?
Well, the data are there now because there are a few international databases. Of course, this kind of computation of the value-added content of export is quite heavy in terms of requirements, because you need to know all the input-output connection in each country, and this kind of national information need to be mutually consistent. So there are a few international databases that are available. Then you need to do some kind of mathematical manipulation to get out these numbers, but now these results are available. Of course, to convince policymakers about that, it's another level of difficulty.
And did you have some examples, for example, for the European Union concerning the tariff protections and
I will provide perhaps some figures this afternoon, but the case of the EU, of course, being an integrated area with the European Union single market, this kind of cross-country use of intermediate goods, it's very, very relevant. I think that a lot of Italian exports take place to German products, for example. And this also has some implications if you think of what is going to happen with the Brexit, because it's not only the fact that you are putting a possible tariff, is that you are disrupting this kind of value chain, and this is another implication of this structural change, that even a small trade cost, like 5% tariff, if you incur it several times because your product has to cross several borders, at the end of the day can be quite significant. And I think that this perhaps has also implications, even if I don't know the region so well, for Latin America and for Mercosur integration and this kind of relationship with other areas.
Okay, so you think that the new agreement between the EU and Mercosur could be a way to be part of the European value chain, and you could be part from the Latin American value chain also if we reduce maybe our bilateral protection.
This is something that should show up in the data, and for sure it show up in the simulation where we do it with some equilibrium models. And basically what happens is that you have an increase of the foreign value added embedded in your export, and possibly the foreign value added most likely to be included is the one from your neighbor's country that are part of one agreement.
Okay, and generally we talk about value added as a whole, and not discriminating if the value added generated by workers or capital or natural resources. Could we think on this kind of disaggregation, for example, by sector and by main factors?
Yes, this can be done by the data, and actually this is also useful for other kind of debates going beyond trade policy. For example, if you think in terms of climate change and carbon emission, you can compute the carbon content of your export. So sometimes you could argue that the final exporter is the polluter, but actually all the suppliers are also part of the contributing to the total emission. So basically I think that this is quite useful. Or you could do that with another important natural resource like water, so there are this kind of computation of the water content of trade flows, or you could do it with, in terms of food security, in terms of the nutrients corresponding to certain agricultural goods. So I think that this kind of information can be useful in several domains and several debates, and the basic insight is that the world is a network, and you cannot really understand bilateral relationship if you don't take into account the whole structure of the network.
Okay, so you are thinking that not only look at trade, but chains, international, global chains, and also take into account more than trade subjects, let's say climate change, also related nutrition and food security, and the use of some resources like water, or even the impact on employment, for example. There are other subjects that could be you analyzed as a chain, as a net, maybe.
No, perhaps I didn't make myself clear. This is all related to trade.
Okay.
But a traded good embeds all these things that you mentioned. Embeds workers, services, embeds pollution, embeds emission, embeds natural resources. So basically my point is that looking at trade flows between country A and country B is not enough, because these trade flows include contribution from the whole network.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much for this short interview. We hope to see you this afternoon in your seminar.
Thanks.
Thank you.